You're listening to Dads, Diapers, and Drinks. 3 dads trying to lead their families well in a crazy world. So grab a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Dads, Diapers, and Drinks. I'm your host, Scott, here with Nathan and Jeff, as per usual.
Yeah.
And for the second time in the last 4 episodes, I think, Dan Adams is back.
Well, hello and thank you.
The man,
You're welcome.
The myth, the legend.
Thank you for joining us. He's not even a myth. He's
here.
Right
I'm
here.
the real deal. Thanks for the invite back, guys. Enjoyed it last time.
Absolutely.
We enjoyed having it. We're excited to jump back into some, maybe not as much of a group counseling sesh this time, but
you never know.
That one was good. Yeah, who knows? We liked it. Hopefully the listeners got something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the listens on that episode, it seemed like they did. Who knows? And I'm also sad to report our massive spike in listens has, we're back in the valley.
We had 2 spikes, and that was it.
Yeah.
And we're back.
I mean,
back to reality.
It did account for like 800 listens collectively between the 2. So
it did. It was
still
kind of exciting. So I don't know. We did literally nothing different. So I guess the algorithm finally noticed, hey, these guys have been uploading consistently for almost a year. Let's give them a little boost.
And props. Almost a year. That's a lot of content.
It
takes
is.
dedication.
It has, yeah. I am proud we made it this far.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, like going into it, I had no idea how far we'd make it. Or
seriously.
I mean, we had good intentions of doing it for a long time. We just didn't know what that would end up being, or if we'd fizzle out or what. But here we are. We're still going, and we've got a second season kind of planned out. So we're gonna get, like I said last week, get us through 52 episodes, because that is 1 year's worth of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll take a little break, and then we'll do a season 2 that'll be a slightly different format. Really not a ton different, I don't think.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I think it's going to be better.
that's
very
That's the
optimistic.
hope.
I'm sure that's the intention.
Yeah, it is the intention. Yeah, stay tuned for season 2. It's definitely going to be worse.
We're planning on making a big downgrade, so
We were thinking of just using our phones as recording devices now and just doing it on the fly.
Yeah.
very casual. Yeah,
Yeah, one person's going to be in their car the whole time.
Just so we have the good road noise effect.
One person's going to have a dog barking in the background.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Every
That's already
conference
pretty normal,
call
actually.
cliche. It's going to be that. Okay,
good
just
night.
kidding. Nathan, what are we drinking this evening?
We are drinking in honor, but
In memoriam.
In memory of.
in memory of Wild Turkey 101. We are having the last of the 101 that Dan kindly brought us a while ago.
Enjoy.
And it's wonderful.
It's very good. We hooked Dan up with some more Canada Dry.
Yeah.
Nice warm Canada Dry.
I still don't have ice cubes, man.
It's perfect, man.
I'm sorry. I'm a terrible host.
Scott, kill me.
I'm going with my the official drink of the show, an old fashioned. So I'm
There you
enjoying that quite a lot. This is my usual want these days. It's, for some reason, it's the most summery of the bourbon drinks for me. It's like sweet and fruity, which makes me feel good. I don't know.
Sure.
Makes me happy this way.
Yeah. Good stuff, man.
Yeah. Anything new over there, Jeff? Life?
Well, yes, quite a bit, really.
Oh, do tell.
My brother and sister-in-law, other Scott,
Yes,
is
Scott
we
2.
refer to him, Scott 2.0 or
No, just 2.
beta. Yeah,
Like he's I'm number 1. He's number 2. Just
okay, sure. But they, my sister-in-law just took a job in Ravenna, so they are actually trying to move up here right now, and they just put an offer in a house in Aurora.
Oh, wow.
So they're
cool.
hopefully going to be moving to the Aurora area soon, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And they crashed with us last weekend out of the blue to go house hunting, and then they're going to be kind of up and out this way a little randomly over the next couple months as they're trying to get a house and then move. So I'll be seeing them a lot, and then they'll be living in the area probably within a half an hour of us, which is going to be really cool. It's never happened before. We never lived that close to them. They've been all over the country for the past 5 years. So it's going to be a big change in our family dynamic, having them right in town.
Yeah.
They have 3 kids. So my kids will be excited. But they were when they were
very
here,
cool.
we had this hilarious. So Andy, my second, is the youngest of all the kids, of all 5 of these kids. So the oldest is almost 5. And the youngest is Andy, who's 9 months old. So all 4 of the bigger kids are running around my house like maniacs, just screaming, running in circles. It's a blast. They're in the 3 Seasons room. They're in a bedroom. They're in Kelly's room. And every time the train of children run out of a room screaming, about 30 seconds later, you'll just see Andy crawl out the room trying to keep up. And at one point, he just got halfway into the doorway. He just looked at me and started crying.
I can't keep up, dude.
I know. It was it
too
was so
much.
funny, but so sad. He was like, no, I can't do it. Yeah.
Not
So
yet.
it was really good. It's going to be fun having all the kids around because Kelly loves hanging out with her cousins. And,
That's awesome.
It's going to be cool.
You guys were thinking this move was going to stick for a while, right?
Yeah. The position that she got promoted to is basically the job that she's wanted for a long time, I believe. Basically, all the moves that she's done around the country, around the company, were to eventually get this job. So we're fairly confident. I mean, they keep talking like they're trying to buy a nice house and like, yeah, we think we're going to be here for maybe forever, maybe for a long time. The goal was always to end up back up in the Cleveland area. So this might be their long time stay, which is really cool.
That's
'Cause,
fantastic.
Again, they've been all over the country,
Yeah.
4 different states or 4 different cities
Yeah.
for the
Well, I
past
think
5 years.
For their kids' sake, I'm sure they're looking forward to staying in one place because now that
Yeah.
they're getting older, like you said, the oldest
They're
is
almost
5,
into school age. Yeah.
you start developing those types of friendships that really hurt to break if you have to move.
Is this Jenna and her family?
Yep.
Cool.
Cool.
Oh man,
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
nice.
There's that. Oh, then also I just signed the contracts for all the work I'm going to have done to my house, which is the biggest thing I've ever offered to pay for in my life.
That's painful.
Stupid amounts of money, but brand new driveway, brand new deck is what we're getting. So
That's terrific.
Good for you.
Sweet.
it's gonna be a nuts year of life for me. The summer's gonna be crazy, and it's starting for me right about now. So it's gonna be a trip.
Yeah. Over the weekend, I finished one project that Nathan and I started 2 weekends ago, which is clearing out the attic space above the garage, which I hope Kelsey doesn't mind if I share this. I should have asked first, but her grandparents were German citizens. Like they moved, they're German immigrants, like off the boat. They moved here. And one of them, I think her grandma, maybe not her grandpa, but her grandma actually like fled the Nazis on a covered wagon. And her grandpa, I honestly don't remember what his history was in Germany before they moved here, but they moved here and they became so attached to their possessions that they absolutely were hoarders. And it's hard to know if I would struggle with that too, having their background. Like it's easy to judge them for like, why do you need all this stuff? But I don't know. I try not to judge too hard, but while Nathan and I were working on clearing it out, we're like, what is this doing here? Like,
You
why
have 18 of the same broom, and they're just up here.
yeah. So I don't know. We pulled down like 10 of these yellow brooms, lots of like trim pieces, windows,
Lots
doors,
of wood.
lots of boards of wood. The reason we had to take all this stuff down is because raccoons had moved in,
Taking
and
up permanent residence.
they defecate everywhere, and every time it rained, the whole garage just stunk to high heavens. And we're planning on doing this big renovation project in our house, and we need to move a lot of items out of the house and into the garage. But we're like, it's gonna all stink by the time we're done with this project. So that necessitated clearing out the attic space above the garage.
And
So
evicting all the raccoons.
evicting the raccoons.
Yes, they have no home anymore.
Yes. So that's all done. There's a massive pile of stuff next to the garage that we'll get a dumpster to fill.
It's astounding.
But yeah, it's crazy. So that was a big big project, but I'm glad it's over. And other than that, it's a pretty chill weekend. Davis spent the night at Kelsey's parents' house on Saturday night.
Ooh, it's the first time.
Sleepover, huh?
Yeah, well, it was his second time. First time did not go well at all.
Ooh.
Second time, he crushed it. He slept through the night. He didn't fuss or anything. He saved all his fussing for once he was returned to us on Sunday. But he was a total champ, which was great. Because that just unlocked a whole new realm of freedom for Kelsey and me.
Sure.
Like, we could just drop you off at your grandparents and you'll be okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So that was great. And then he's just been learning a ton lately. Like, it's crazy. He's starting to mimic me in everything I do. So I have a golf net in the backyard, and every time we're outside, just to keep Davis occupied, I hit golf balls into the golf net, and he retrieves them. And he takes his little plastic golf club and tries to swipe at him, and it's just getting fun. So
Yeah.
it's things.
You've definitely rounded the corner with kids where for the first year, you're just like constantly looking after them. Like, don't fall off the chair, don't fall off the thing, don't stab yourself with the fork. You're just like always looking at them, trying to not get them hurt. And then you round a corner, you're just like, hey, I actually don't mind doing this with you.
Yeah.
Like, you go now, he'll go on your bed and want to jump on your bed, and you'll like cover him with a pillow, and he'll get a kick out of that. You're like, I'm having fun. I'm actually having fun doing this.
Yes.
I'm not faking this. I'm actually genuinely enjoying what I'm doing with you.
Right.
Which is when you have little kids, you're like, look, it's a toy. How fun is that?
And they
You're like,
don't
this is
react.
really fun.
Yeah.
But then you get to an age where like, I actually am playing with you and enjoying it. And that's a really fun moment.
He's at the age now where we can buy him toys that we actually find fun to play with ourselves. So like, I'll bring him down here in the basement, and he'll be running around, whatever. I'll start shooting hoops. With his little toy basketball hoop. So I'm like, I'm having fun too. So
Scott and I have burned
Nathan
many an hour shooting random shots.
We played a game of horse.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
So
It's good stuff.
yeah, it's been good.
My life's been relatively normal, which is generally is kind of nice. I've been enjoying the very homeostasis of my life right now. It's been very uneventful in a very
That's good.
positive way. So,
That's great. Uneventful's good, I think.
yeah.
We'll take it as a positive.
Exactly.
Dan, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Just what you're talking about, being like steady in the there's a big difference between being stuck in the rut and in the groove. Like It looks very similar from the outside, but like if this is the course that you've chosen for your life and it's going according to plan, that's in the groove, and it's very fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Being stuck in a rut gets real old real fast.
Yeah, that's a very different feeling.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Last time we chatted, was that before Easter, right? Or was it right after Easter? Yeah. And so Easter, I work at a church. I'm a pastor. Easter is a big, busy time. And then as soon as Easter was done, my family and I pieced out. We went out to a state park, got a room in a lodge, went on hikes, played volleyball at the racquetball courts, and went in the hot tub and the pool, and
That's
just
awesome.
had down family time. Came back for the second half of the week. I hit the jackpot this year. This isn't always the case. All three of my girls, and my wife's a teacher, so all three of my girls are in 3 different schools, which is insane most of the time for scheduling. I hit the jackpot. They all had the same spring break right after Easter, so we all were able to have family time off.
That's awesome.
They wanted this. They're old enough now that they can tell us what they want to do for spring break also.
Right.
And it's usually pretty reasonable. So they all had like friends over, or went over a friend's place, or had a pizza night or whatever. And so it was just a good family time. Last week was a little bit crazy. I was speaking at a conference out of state, and so that was fun and exciting to get to have a change of pace. And it was a lot of I'm a fairly extroverted person. I love to be around people, but it was a 5.5 hour drive there and a 5.5 hour drive back by myself. And I just love listening to podcasts and listening to audiobooks.
You racked up all of our listens.
But it was just my episode though. So I just listened to it over and over and over again.
Because you listen on like 2 times speed or something. Right?
I do. Yeah.
So you could probably, in 5.5 hours, you could get through.
Somebody do the math on that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. So that's been good. The new exciting thing for our family is my oldest daughter is 16 and on the brink of getting her driver's license. So just got a third car for the family. She calls it her car. I remind her that it's Dad's third vehicle that you get to borrow.
Dad is permitting you to drive his third car.
Yeah.
Yes.
But she's a good driver. She's finished up with classes and all, and so she'll be taking the test here soon. So that's exciting. It's a rite of passage in the family.
Is that a relief for you that she can get around herself, or is it you worried or?
No, it sounds like I'm bragging, and I don't take this for granted. All three of our kids are fairly responsible for their age, and our oldest is no exception. And she's a little bit of grandma of a driver. If anything, I have to encourage her to be a little bit more aggressive. She's not like a speed racer.
Her a few times.
Yeah. So she's a very cautious driver, so I'm not worried about that. And her school is about a half an hour away. She goes to a private school, and so it's a half an hour away. And her younger sister is going to be going to that school next year with her. Oh, wow. And they both play sports. So having a third driver will really help a ton.
Yeah.
That was me and Scott in high school.
Yeah.
I never rode the bus in high school because he's 2 years older than me. So by the time I was a freshman, he was a junior and he was driving.
Yeah.
He drove me to and from school on most days. And then by the time he left high school, I was a junior and I drove.
Right.
So my parents all through high school basically never had to worry about wherever I was because I got my rides home.
So that's the exact same setup we have going into this next school year. Although I don't know if you looked to buy a vehicle recently, thanks to COVID and supply chain. Like the car market is garbage right now.
Yes,
you can pay twice as much for half as much a vehicle. So I got a decent vehicle. I mean, it's 10 years old, but I bought a project. I've got some work to do on it before I want my daughter driving it on the highway.
Sure,
but it's all work that I can do on my own. So
nice.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, our parents were super excited for Jeff and me to get our licenses because they were just sick of driving us around.
All the sporting events for sure.
Yeah, sports and church and everything we were involved in. Just they were tired of it.
Right.
But I knew I had friends who just were in no hurry to get their license. I was like, what?
I know I couldn't.
One of my best friends didn't get it until he was 18.
Yeah, my time working with youth ministry stuff. There's the kids who were like 18 were like, I might go get my license now. I was like, well, you might. Dude, the second I turned 16, I was like, get me out. I was excited.
I didn't have any understanding of that. They when I was taking driver's ed, it was offered through the public school. I don't think that's the case much anymore.
No,
but it was a class that you could take in high school, which was great. And I think 2 days after my birthday, I took the test, got my license. I was ready to go. It worked out really well for me, though. My wife, Grace, didn't get her license until she was 18 or 19. It was they didn't have money for driver's ed or anything. She was homeschooled, didn't have money in the family for driver's ed. She'd have to go elsewhere. She couldn't get it in school. And consequently, we went to the same church and we're in the same youth group, and she lived like 5 minutes away. We weren't dating at the time, but I drove her and her family everywhere to everything. So we had tons of car time by the time
there you go.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Meant to be, man.
Right? And they lived happily ever after.
That's right. That's where the sparks started flying.
No, it's interesting because the whole like 18 or older was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go get my license now. Was like those were the outliers when we were in high school.
For sure.
Yeah.
But that's the norm now. There's like 23-year-olds that are like, I don't want my license. I'll just Uber or walk.
Are you
crazy?
I could see that if you live in a city.
Yeah, and if you live in a city, but like, what happened before the city? Like, unless you grew up in the city and then stayed there,
Right.
I would still lose my mind.
I just hired an intern for the summer who is in her 20s and doesn't have her driver's license. And that was a consideration. Like, are you going to be able to get to and from and be able to do the duties and responsibilities if you can't get yourself there?
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, like our cousin Charlie lived in New York City and he bought his first car at like 36.
Wow.
He had an apartment.
He lived in New York City. He's like, I don't need a car. And he didn't have one until he was in his like late 30s.
Yeah. He worked for American Express and it was walking distance from his apartment. And then he lived in Singapore and then.
Wow.
Yeah, he just, I don't know, never needed a car.
But in New York, you have the subway and the buses and everything.
Right.
Gets you all over.
Yeah.
He lives literally like in Manhattan, like
downtown.
So it's kind of fun.
He
to
always
visit
offers, is like, you guys should come out and visit. And we're like, what's your apartment? It's a studio apartment. It's me and my dog.
Dude, it's tiny. And it's so
I got a family
expensive.
of 4. I'm not joining you there, man.
Oh my word, that'd be wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our topic of discussion tonight, which we've already started alluding to, well, one of the potential topics, one we know we want to talk about is education.
I'm in favor. Just to get that out right at the forefront. Yeah.
I was concerned.
Yeah. Didn't want to
I'm glad.
blindside you there. I'm talking about what? So yeah, Dan, you said I forgot exactly what you said last time. You said you had experience with 3 different types of schooling: private, public, and homeschooling.
Yeah. So in our family, So I'm a product of public education. I grew up here in the Cleveland area, went to Parma City schools. Parma City schools were a much stronger school system back then, but still had all of the stereotypical challenges that a public school would have.
Sure.
And it was a large school district. My graduating class was 500 about, the school had a couple thousand people in it.
Wow. So that's twice the size of our class.
Right. Yep. And so that was my experience growing up. My elementary school had 500 people in it. I don't remember what junior high had, but that was I had very traditional, stereotypical public school education. Until I went off to college, went to Cedarville University, which is a private Christian college, very different. Was I think the campus population was like 2,500 at the time, so just barely larger than my high school.
Right.
So you could still know everybody. So that was my background,
that's
educational.
That's Grove City's size too.
Yeah. Right.
So that's where I went.
Grace flip-flopped. She did the exact opposite. She was homeschooled all the way through high school. And then when she went off to college, she went to Cleveland State, so a state school. Yeah. And so her educational experience was very different, exact opposite. And then when we came to having kids and what our philosophy is, what our game plan for schooling them was, we came from 2 very different perspectives.
Right.
My thinking was, well, I went to public school and I think I turned out okay. I mean, I had issues with that, but I also turned out okay. Yeah. And most kids, that's the majority of what American citizens do. They send their kids to public schools, and it seems to work out for the most. And we'll be actively engaged parents, and we'll help them navigate that. And Grace was of the persuasion that maybe we'll homeschool. I should back up and say Grace is a licensed educator. She's a teacher, elementary school teacher. And so I thought the best of both worlds. I've got a teacher in my house. If we homeschool, like she's not just a mom I don't mean just a mom, but she has specific training in education and knows pre-adolescent development and all of that, and knows how to teach, and has a firsthand experience with it. So I thought that would be good. And then the Lord has a sense of humor. And just about the time I was working on youth pastor salary, which I don't know if any of your listeners know, isn't usually typically very much.
Yeah.
And just about the same time we were putting our kids into school. Oh, one other outlayer to this. My wife was now working at Parma Heights Christian Academy, which is a Christian elementary school. So now she's a teacher, but not in the public school, but in a Christian academy. And it was outside of what we could ever afford. At the same time, the Lord moved us from the church that we're at to the church that we're now at now. Grace stayed on staff there. Well, when we were raising our kids, she wasn't on staff. She stayed at home when the kids were at home, but she now works there again now that all of the kids are in school. And so our kids have gone through private Christian education, both middle school, elementary, middle school, and now high school. And we've really wrestled with that decision for our family and how to navigate that and how to make the decision. You know, in part, you want to guard and protect your kids and give them a firm foundation. And the argument can be made for that happens best at home, or maybe the Christian school does that really well. And you have the support of other resources with that. You know, you can also say, hey, the salt needs to get outside of the salt shaker. We're called to be the salt and the light of the world. Exactly. When are we ever going to do that? We need to get our kids in the public school. What if all the Christian families pull all of their kids out of public schooling, and what does that do for that? Right. So, you know, so those are things we've had to navigate.
Yeah. I had a thought and it was gone.
It's fine. So that's very interesting, because I think that the difference of opinion specifically between spouses, and like, I feel like it's very easy to go entirely from like what you experienced to be like, yeah, that's reasonable. Whether it was, oh, I had a terrible experience in public school, my kids are never going to public school, that's atrocious, or vice versa, where you're like, yeah, it was great.
The only way.
Absolutely, the only way you can do it. And I feel like it's very easy to be very passionate about that particular topic. I mean, even like exactly what you said, where it's just like, you're like, I'm fine. I turned out good.
Right.
How is this not a great path? And exactly what you said of, you know, it's like, if you put all the kids in one school, it's like, how are the kids that didn't get the opportunity to go to church growing up really going to be able to see, you know, the love of Jesus?
Right. One other layer to that I didn't expect, a challenge once we made the decision with our oldest to put her into private elementary school, not just private, but specifically Christian elementary school, was every child is different and every child has different needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it never occurred to me that I would be making this decision for each child. But we've actively made sure that we think this through. So for our second child, is this still the best schooling option? Just because our first child did that doesn't mean that that would be the best environment necessarily for. Now, we've come to the same conclusion for all three kids, but not on autopilot.
Right.
Evaluated it for each of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think,
That's tough.
I mean, public school has changed a lot since we were in public school. Like Jeff and I went to public school. Nathan was homeschooled. So I'm curious
Sorry,
about
I feel
that.
like I'm obligated to throw that in.
Are we allowed to tell homeschool jokes?
Oh yeah, by all
boy.
means.
I said yes
They're
for
some of my
Nathan.
favorites.
So
Okay,
we're
thank
going
you,
to tell homeschool. I don't care what your
The,
answer.
They
the
fly
perception
left
of
and right.
homeschoolers by public schoolers is that homeschoolers are all the weird kids.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is just the perception. I know it's not true. Obviously, I'm very good friends with Nathan, but literally, I think until I befriended Nathan, I thought homeschool kids were weird, and then I became friends with Nate, and I was like, oh, maybe that idea was wrong.
Yeah, some of my best friends from college were actually products of homeschool as well, and they wait, you're not awkward. Okay, that
hold
opened
on,
my eyes
hold
a
on.
little bit.
I feel like I earned the right to make fun of homeschoolers seeing that I married one,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
even kidding. Last night we were driving. I don't remember where we were driving home from. We're driving home from somewhere, and my wife comments about her siblings and just how did all three of she has three siblings, a brother and two sisters. How did all of my siblings turn out so weird? And I waited a beat. She didn't put the connection. I'm like, do you think it could be that they grew up with no social norms around them? Like and that's a very positive thing in many ways.
They
So
weren't part of society when they grew up.
and so homeschooling is free from all of those expectations and the mold that you get conformed to and everything, but also you get some weird stuff coming out of that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's homeschooling. I kind of considered it. Well, obviously we're not at the decision point yet because Davis is 15 months old. Kelsey has no interest in doing that, so that kind of shoots that idea out of the water. But what I was getting at before is how much public school has changed in the last 10 years, almost 11 years for me now. And all the crazy stuff you see in the news, some of these math problems that have a word element to them that has nothing to do with the math. It's all about kind of conditioning your brain to do weird stuff. I don't know, to think that mother's only choice was to prostitute herself instead of working another job, weird stuff like that.
Yeah. Mom can make $50 an hour as a bartender or $80 an hour as a stripper. Which should she do to make this much money in this many hours? And you're like, why is that?
Or some of the writing prompts.
problem?
Some of the writing prompts these kids have to write essays on are just ridiculously sexualized. It's we had none of that in high school. So these things pop up in my news feeds, and as now that I'm a father, I'm thinking, wow, do I want my kid going to public school? Should I homeschool for part of the time and then public school later? Because I knew people at our high school who did that, and they were a great family, and they're not weird. They were you wouldn't even know. They're homeschooled and then went to public school just for the high school years. So I'm like, well, we could do something like that. That's kind of a good combination of having your own, like, being the primary instructor of your kid when they're the most impressionable, and then equipping them to get out of the salt shaker once they hit high school and go out into the world at another really formative point of kids' lives. So I don't know. It's were you guys sold on doing the private school thing? Did you how close were you to not going the private school route?
So we had been praying about it very fervently and asking for clear direction. And it was one of those situations where it really felt like it was just going to come down to flip a coin. We get to decide. Lord's giving us an option and a choice. Yeah. And it was at that same time we were praying, Lord, if you were allow us to put our kids in, and we already knew the school we'd want to go with. We had looked at multiple schools, but Grace was working at the school because one, in part, it was a job opportunity, but two, geographically, it was very convenient for us. It's in the building that I work in, and it's very convenient. The commute's 7 minutes from our house, but it also has all the same shared values that we have, and so. I said, Lord, if you want that to happen, you're going to have to provide, like financially provide for that. I don't see any pathway for that. and it was within months that I'm changing churches. That was not the motivation to change churches whatsoever. The two totally separate issues for us, but the Lord uprooted us and planted us at that same church, school, and ministry.
Yeah.
And with that came a lot of confirmation for us and some financial benefits too. Being on staff, I get a little bit of a discount, and I was making a better pay then. So financially, it was a possibility for us. But I'll tell you,
it just made a lot of sense.
Yeah, private education, at least here in Ohio, is not easy. There are other places where there are educational vouchers that make it possible for you to take the state funding and uproot it and take it with you to whatever school, whether it's public or community or a private school. Ohio's not like that, at least not right now. There are a couple of bills that they're working on right now.
It's in the works, right?
Yep, the backpack bill would free up those fundings, and anybody who's in favor of private education, I'd say that's a very positive move, and I would encourage that. But otherwise, I mean, elementary school, at least here in 2022, is $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year per student. Middle school is about that or a little bit more. High school is 12, 13, 14K a year.
Wow.
And so that gets expensive.
Those are numbers I literally hadn't considered.
Right. And so you don't do that on a whim. There's a significant investment to be able to do that.
Tell us we're homeschooling.
Right. And for our family and for our children, so far, it has been the right choice.
Yeah.
But every family is different.
Right. Absolutely. And the choice could change next year for all you know.
Yeah.
But,
we evaluate that. Yep.
Yeah. How, obviously we're approaching this decision as if private schools are this pure, ultra clean, nothing bad ever happens.
Oh, that's not true.
That's
Yes.
What types of negative influences do you think there still are?
There are all of the same.
All of them?
All of the same. Yep. To a lesser degree, here's what the main difference is. So, if in a Parma public school, a biological male decides that he is no longer a he but a she, and that's how he is going to identify as a she, and wants to use an alternative gendered bathroom, that's permitted.
In Parma it is?
I can't speak specifically, but in some of the public schools around here, that's permitted.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, see that?
Now, at a Christian school, and this happened at one of my daughter's schools, that one of the children, and this is elementary or middle school age. So you wonder what's going on. At least I did, and I don't remember if it was a he who wanted to use a girl's bathroom or vice versa, but they were using the opposite biologically gendered bathroom, or they were insisting on doing that. And the school said, well, no. I mean, that's no. So I now am partnering with a school administration who holds the same shared values. All of the same worldliness is out there. All the same temptations are out there. Our families are marinating all in the same, I don't know. I don't know what kind of rabbit hole I want to go down here. I think there's a worldview very different than what I hold from someone who is trying to raise my family from a biblical Christian standpoint.
Yeah.
And the schools that we have chosen to send our kids to have those same shared values. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to attend those schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not a requirement. You don't have to sign a salvation statement or something, but you do have to sign, we will support this statement of faith, and here are the values that we hold to.
Sure.
All of our staff are held to these standards and expectations and a conduct of living. That's fairly reasonable.
I'm sure that's attractive to a lot of non-Christians too. Is it? Or just a code of conduct, or like a,
yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second.
Sorry. I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, but that's helpful. And to know that when we come to, so those same issues are going to crop up, probably not quite as frequently, but I'm going to side with the administration, or vice versa. The administration is going to have a shared value with me, and I know that I'm not wrestling also with this student who I think is off track with their insistent that they're another gender than their actual body tells them that they are. But now I'm also fighting the administration of the school who's going to make my daughter be in the bathroom with a boy sharing the same stall area, whatever.
Right.
Your question was, is that attractive to others? We have seen an influx, at least in our school and in the private schools in this area. We keep our thumb on the pulse of what happening in other schools. Most of the Christian elementary and middle schools and high schools are busting at the seams right now. Pre-COVID, it was pretty flatlined for the most part, but a lot of schools saw some significant growth because of COVID and because of the mandates and how schools were handling things just across the board. And it's a lot easier to navigate some of those things when you're a smaller entity. You know, our school only has one kindergarten class and one first grade class and one second grade class. Now that's a downside too, though, and a different from a social standpoint. That's a different thing.
Right.
You know, I remember being in elementary school and a public school, and if I didn't get along with so and so next year, I might be in a different fourth grade class, and they're with a different teacher, and I'm with a different teacher. If there's a bully in your class or somebody you just don't get along with, you're stuck with them for 6 or 7 years every day, all the way through. Yeah,
right. But you'd hope the bullying became more obvious. Like there are less places to hide, I guess.
That's true. Yep.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully,
So what did the private schools do differently during COVID that made them more attractive? Like how did your girls' school handle that differently? Because I happened to be in a Bible study led by one of the board members of Chagrin Falls Schools right when COVID hit. So I got kind of a front row seat to everything that they were doing and how they were making their decisions. So I'm kind of curious what it was like for you as a parent with your kids.
Did you say that was a public or a private school? I missed it. I'm sorry.
it's public.
It was a public school, Chagrin Falls Public School.
Okay. So hopefully this is a thing of the past, and I don't want to get into it. And I don't know how everybody even in this room feels about masks or mandates. Well, I've listened to the podcast. I know, but I'm thinking particularly of your listeners, and I don't want to be divisive.
Yeah.
However, our society mandates
We don't
and
care.
being
Good
told
for you.
being told
That's
what
nice.
to do and having across the board mandates that many people felt violated their personal choice and personal responsibility. Public schools were just following the mandates and were required by the Ohio Department of Health and had check-ins regularly. It was different for private schools, and different private schools handled it differently. They had certain things, health check marks that they had to reach, and I wasn't in the nitty-gritty details of those, but the school administrations get to decide how they want to respond to certain things and how they want to implement things. And so they could do things differently than the public schools. Our school, for the first year of COVID, did go along with the mask mandates. And we saw a lot of people leave our school because of that. And we saw a lot of people come to our school because of how we were doing things differently. But there are other private schools in the area who said, mask mandates, what? Nope, we're not requiring them at all. And they got in some heat for that, but also they said, you can't make us. And so
that's what I was mostly curious about is did private schools actually have the ability to say, no, we don't have to follow the same mandates, the same health mandates that come down from the Ohio Board of Health?
No, they didn't have that freedom.
But they did anyways.
But
They extended their middle finger.
yeah, but there were schools that chose to enforce it and schools that did not choose to enforce it. Public schools across the board chose to impose it or enforce those mask mandates and all the social distancing and everything. Yeah, but there were a number of private schools. They didn't say it this way, but essentially, if you're going to make us, you're going to have to make us.
Yeah.
Right. I think our church operated similarly, where we were told when we were reopening, they were told by, I don't know what board of whatever makes decisions like this, but they basically told by the Ohio or the county government that they need to put up signs that say, please social distance and please wear your mask. And then the church, when it said, is that all we have to do? They said, yep. Can you section off? Can you row off every other row of chairs and put up signs that say, please wear masks? We're like, okay, that's all we have to do. Yep. All right, we'll do it. Yeah. And then we opened. It's like, we'll follow those rules. We're not going to enforce. We're going to kick you out of the church? No.
Right.
So
No.
we'll put the signs up, but we're not going
butts in the seats,
arrest
man.
people.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah. It was also polarizing. I don't know. I've said this multiple times. I was basically confused to inaction. I don't know. The noise from both sides was so opposing. So it's I don't know which way to are masks effective? I don't know. Is social
Half the
distancing
country
effective?
says they do
I
nothing.
don't know.
Half the country says they'll save your life.
Right.
So all I had to go on was just my basic, I don't know, intuition and just a few basic statistics. Okay, I don't think I'm actually at risk of this thing. I understand the older generation is. Kids don't seem to be at all, so I don't know why they're being masked. my approach was very basic. So, anyway, don't need to go down the COVID rabbit hole.
When you have a school, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, especially since for all intents and purposes, COVID is not directly impacting our lives right now, which is
essentially
actually kind of wonderful.
I think we're might be post-COVID. I don't know.
Did you just jinx it?
Oh, man.
Scott?
3.0 was around the corner. Thanks.
Yeah.
Scott.
Now our podcast listeners are in the toilet. The algorithm just shut us down.
So there is one nice thing when it comes to being in a private school. So in a public school, just because of vast numbers, you're lost there. Not maybe in the classroom, but for a parent to have a voice, you can go to a PTF meeting or whatever. But you're one voice in thousands or tens of thousands of representatives. Whereas a private school is typically in the hundreds of students, right? And so PTF, you have a voice and you can be actively involved. And sometimes that's wonderful and sometimes that's really messy. But in a school the size of our school at our church, that means as a dad, I can be actively involved. I can be regularly involved. I can help shape what the school is going to be and help. I'm not the superintendent. I don't cast vision for the school or whatever, but I have a voice and it's heard and I'm known and I'm recognized by everybody. I know all the students. I also have close proximity because I work in the same building and I'm a pastor on staff there. I speak in chat. One of the things we have chapel weekly at our school.
That's cool.
So, they gather for a time of worship, and most other schools, at least public schools, when is the entire school body together? At 3 or 4 times a year for an assembly or for the musical.
Talk about drug use or something.
Right.
Yeah, the DARE program comes in.
Yes.
Yeah. Our school is together every week. And that's true for all of my girls' schools, middle school and high school as well. They get together as a school body every week, and there's always some short message and a time of worship. And, they're talking about the scripture verses that they're memorizing, that sort of thing. But every parent has sent their kid knowing that that's a value and that's going to be a part of the student body life there. And I think that's been wonderful for our kids.
Well, I think it's really valuable to kind of incorporate those sorts of values that you have into the daily life. Like this is part of learning. And I feel like especially, in public schools, that basically follow exactly what the state says. That's not something their kids are going into these schools and they're having to be, especially if they're Christians, they're having to be on guard. They're having to be, very focused about what they're choosing to do and what they're choosing to say and think and all those things.
Yeah. I'm getting even more concerned with, and this isn't to bash public school. I'm a product of public schools, and and I love. I have numerous friends who are teachers in the public school, and I have for years, nearly 2 decades, worked with student ministry within our church, and so have invested my life working with middle schoolers and high schoolers. But I'm very concerned with the direction of our public schools, how woke they're become, critical race theory. We have a dark history of racism in our country, but also we're trying to rewrite history, and it's becoming very manipulative in some ways. And the private school gives the opportunity to choose curriculum other than what the state hands down.
Yeah,
and that's wonderful.
And as parents in a smaller school, you have more of a say in kind of what that is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, to speak to that even further, that was something that I think was very valuable in my schooling as a homeschooler. So my sister went clean from elementary all the way up through high school. She was homeschooled. When we were really young and we lived in England, we went to a private school there.
I just learned a new thing about Nathan.
Elementary. So we were homeschooled after that. And when we came back to America, we were homeschooled from that point. Especially as missionaries, we're constantly moving around. It was not only practical, but it was also the education that my mom wanted for me and my sister. But the other big thing that was really influential, and I know that schools have a lot of structures in place to help kids, but I had very specific learning struggles that I had that would not have been met, or I would not have gotten through education as a whole and become who I am today if my mom had not put in the blood, sweat, and tears to get me the exact education that I needed.
Sure.
And I think
did she pull in outside resources to help with that?
She did beyond resources and research and everything to be able to make that happen. And I mean, my sister had her own struggles. I mean, everybody does, but I definitely had my own thing that was very challenging. I had dyslexia, which made reading and writing very difficult for me and stuff like that. So my mom was very able to kind of tailor my education to what I needed. But on top of that fact, I think part of the struggle when you have like homeschooling in general is the whole social component that you guys were talking about. And I think the reason that stereotype exists is because a lot of kids that do go into homeschooling can become so sheltered because their parents are like, oh, we don't want them to see anything. We're just going to put them in this box and leave them there. It can be a terrible thing. And that's where you get these homeschoolers that are like, do they talk? I don't know if they talk.
They haven't had exposure to the real world. They don't know how to respond to it in some cases.
Exactly. And so there's that component, but I think that it also can force kids, and I definitely experienced this, of being forced into chosen social interactions. So all of my friends that I had were not products of like, oh, we just go to the same place, I guess we're friends. They were all chosen social interactions that I had to push. Yeah. Especially like we had like what was called like a co-op, and I think you guys were incorporated in something similar to that when you were in Minnesota, right?
Yes. The school that we went to for elementary when we were in Minnesota was packed charter school. Mm-hmm. That was because even at that time, my parents didn't want us in the public schools of Minneapolis because it wasn't nothing to brag about there.
We lived in Brooklyn Park. It was I think it wasn't a great situation, I'm pretty sure, with the schools. But,
you may recognize the name of that for a couple events that happened in 2020.
Brooklyn Center is where all the crap in 2020 went down, which is right next door.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Wasn't the best area per se, and the public schools were not fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to this little charter school, which was started as a homeschool co-op group that outgrew its homeschool name and became a charter school.
Yeah.
So we were brought into that. And it was very small. I mean, there was 2 classes per. So there was like 20, maybe there's 30 first graders.
So first and second graders were taught by the same teacher. Third and fourth grade taught by the same teacher. Fifth and sixth grade taught by the same teacher.
Interesting.
There are 2 teachers per group. So there are 2 first and second grade classes, 2 third and fourth grade classes, 2 fifth and sixth grade classes. So it was like, a homeschool group that got way too big for being a homeschool group. And it became its own school.
Now, Nate, what was the co-op that you were a part of? Was it here locally?
Yes,
it was.
It was East Side. It was right in the Bainbridge area, actually, like Bainbridge, Aurora, that sort of area. And I think that it's very much a scenario of homeschooling is exactly, you can have as good of an education. You could probably have the best education homeschooling, education-wise, because it can be exactly what you need, but it's entirely what is put into it is what comes out of it.
Sure.
So the amount of effort that my mom went into of making sure that we were involved in sports, and my dad as well, but making sure that we were in different things. Like I got to do speech and debate growing up, and I got to be, in a lot of different areas that there's just no way that you can, from just a pure scheduling standpoint, do as like in public school. Like the amount of extracurricular, like field trip type things, like true, like just learning experiences per se, there's just no parallel. There's no way that it can occur from just a pure feasible standpoint of logistics. So,
as we were evaluating what avenue we're going to take for our kids, that was one of the things that if we were to do homeschooling, we would do that because we want to have some sort of significant say and control in what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn and be able to tailor make it, just like you said.
Yeah.
But we would also have them involved in a co-op, and there are a couple here in the area that we know of that are strong and that would be beneficial, so that there are those social interactions. But there are also the other things that you can't easily provide at home. You get out of it as much as you put in, which you were just identifying. I'm thinking for my own wife, I love her to death, but she has struggled in math as an adult, and now she's a teacher. She's had to relearn some math things so that she can teach them. Yeah. Her mom is not strong at math. Her dad's highest education is 8th grade, and then he dropped out of school. And so those were her educators. And so her level of formal math training is much lower because her teachers didn't have the skills to teach anything higher than that.
Yeah.
But what if she was going to go into she doesn't have the option easily to go into a field where she would ever get algebra 2 or calculus or calc 2 or stats
Right.
or anything like that. Or what about the science classes? You're not dissecting fetal pigs at home, probably. And you don't have an entire
surprised.
well, maybe raccoons in the backyard. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the big science labs that high schools have, and you have the Bunsen burners, the beakers, and everything. I mean, there's so much money invested in that you don't have at home. And so a lot of the STEM programs where many students, if they had exposure to it, might excel at that.
Yeah.
But if you're only, I don't mean to minimize it, but if homeschooling is your only experience, you're not involved in another co-op that brings in some other resources, people who are skilled in that particular field or have the equipment to be able to study that, it can be self-limiting a little bit too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool thing about homeschooling, which you kind of said earlier, is that you can tailor the education to exactly what the kid needs.
Right.
And if you're to stick that same kid in public school or even private school where they have 28 of their peers listening to the same instruction, they can only accelerate as quickly as the slowest kid in that class, pretty much.
That is so frustrating.
Yeah. Like you might be a whiz. You might be a math whiz.
I think that was literally my problem in high school.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
for me too.
just couldn't handle what?
So you could be a genius at a certain subject, but you're just stuck going at the same pace as everyone else.
Yeah.
Whereas homeschool, you'd be like, well, he understands calculus already. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's do differential equations or whatever.
That was my experience in high school, just like you, Jeff. I remember sitting in Calc 1. I was in the, it's going to sound like I'm bragging, and maybe I am. I took Calc 1 in high school. I was with a couple buddies who were brainiacs. They carried me most of the way, but we self-studied Calc 2 at the same time. Our teacher in high school was a college professor at Tri-C. He said, "You're welcome to do Calc 2." He provided us the material, so what
a guy.
we learned them in tandem. But I remember sitting in class when he was lecturing, and Julie was in our class. She was an A student, but she was slow to get there, and she had her spring-loaded arm. He wouldn't even be done with the instruction. She's got her arm up, asking him to explain exactly what he just said, and I'm like, oh my goodness, and we could only go as fast as Julie in the class. Yeah.
So that stuff drove me so nuts in school. Like I had the kind of I don't know how to describe it. My teachers knew that I probably knew the answer to questions when I wasn't paying attention. So like one of my English teachers, if he ever saw me completely zoned out, not paying attention, he'd call on me to give whatever answer to the question was going on, and then I would. Because he knew that I was bored and not paying attention anymore because I'd already figured out what was going on and was just sitting there like, class sucks.
Which teacher was that?
What's his name? Our senior year honors English.
Connell. I knew you were going to say that.
Connell. Yeah, Connell. He was just the best freaking teacher.
He was good.
And homeschooling provides you that environment where you can recognize your child's weaknesses and shore them up, and strengths and lean into them and watch them excel like no other.
That was 100% my experience. Like math and science, I wanted math and science. That was my thing. I had this, what was like the big company that like made books. It was like I don't remember, but it was like the main, is it Scholastic? Yeah, Scholastic.
Sounds familiar.
They've made a lot of educational
good.
books, but we got, I think it was like from a yard sale or for somewhere that was like this encyclopedia of science. But it was literally just like a bunch of science topics, but the thing was huge. And I would literally sit there by myself and just like read it for fun. Like that was like, no, this is what I want to do. And like there was one year, like when I went through geometry, like my brain just got that really quick. I finished that 2 months into the year.
Boom.
And then I was like,
next topic.
Next one. You know, and so I would spend,
that's great.
I could very easily consume certain topics, but then, you know, I would spend like a quarter of the day on like 3 subjects, and then I would be on English and writing for like half the day because I would just have to really hammer on it just for it to get through my brain.
Yeah.
And also there's those kinds of positive things. Like you can go as fast as you can go.
Right.
I finished my schoolwork at 11. Oh, I want to wake up at 6 and, you know, so that I can go out and play or do whatever the other thing that I want to do. I could totally do that. I was done at 11 o'clock in the morning and be like, and now the rest of the day
it's not a mandatory 7 hours every day. Yeah.
Or your family can go on vacations randomly in the middle of the school year.
Oh, so
seriously.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it can also be incorporated. Like we would go on like a road trip and we're going to stop at these 3 parks that also have these science exhibits or like these art exhibits or whatever, and you like learn a thing. Okay, guess what? You're gonna write a report on this art exhibit that we went. So, okay, great, thanks, Mom. But like there is so much more exposure in that regard. But similar to what you said, it's like there's a larger world exposure of seeing and encountering a lot more things because you have that freedom.
Right.
But the thing is that it's always a trade because exactly like the resources that schools have, like unless you're like super rich, there's just no way that you can do it unless you are incorporated in like a co-op. Like we did a lot of our like main like science like dissections and stuff as a group, and they would bring in a specialist person that was like, this is like what they do. Like they know all these science classes, and we'd have presentations and stuff.
But it's hard to do that if you're just doing it isolated on your own. Right.
And I feel like the big struggle is that there are some parents that are like, yes, I want to do homeschooling so that I can train my child in a vacuum. I want to just educate them to be, because there's so much fear that can be surrounded to that.
Yeah. One area that the public schools do have these other two options, homeschooling and private education, beat is just the sheer resources that they have, because speech therapists or setting up ISPs and IEPs for students, or to be able to bring in language specialists for kids who are coming from families where English is a secondary language, or I mean, just think of all the specialists that public schools have on their payroll that they bring in and out of class and pull kids for things, and they get that specialized help, which many kids need, and that's fantastic. Now, that's more challenging in the homeschool area. The private schools here, Parma City schools, will contract with them, and you can bring specialists in for some of that. But it's always an add-on. We don't have any of them on staff.
Yeah.
The end.
That's what those voucher programs.
The end.
What, Jeff?
Yeah, that's what the voucher programs are. What's so encouraging to me, because of what that would mean for the entire economic situation of schools.
Yes.
Where if suddenly schools are being paid regardless of size, I guess if you meet a certain quota, I don't know exactly how the rules work. But then every student that goes to your school gets a set amount of public money to fund them, would suddenly mean that even your smaller private schools would be receiving a significantly more money, hopefully, or more guaranteed money, which we could potentially bring in more specialists like that and have more of those type of experiences. Which is like that to me, if that happens before my kids enter school, that throws a huge wrench in all of my educational plans for them. Because I don't even know what it means for the market of schools. If that goes through, so it's going to be fascinating.
Well, and it'll be a huge advantage to you too, especially if you're considering private education or homeschooling. Don't discount the fact that homeschooling is not. I mean, it's cheaper than private education, but it's not cheap either.
Not free.
No, all the curriculum that you have to purchase. So anybody who's choosing something other than public school right now is paying for education for their kids twice.
Yep.
Because I still pay in my taxes, in my property taxes, I still pay for the Parma City schools, and then I pay for all the private education on top of that without the voucher program.
True that. Hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
And even then, homeschooling has completely launched in a different direction with the advent of, high-speed internet and technology being what it is. I mean, there's literally
online resources,
like proper like teaching in specialized areas that can occur now. Like when I did it, my mom literally taught me. Like when I did math, it was like a huge thing, as they had like VHS tapes, and you would put in the VHS tape, and they're like, he's going to teach this lesson, and you would like watch the lesson, and then you'd do like all the workbooks and stuff to go with it.
Right.
And I was like, that was like a crazy thing. Like, oh, my mom's not going to teach me this. Well, that's weird.
This is a treat. Yeah.
But it is also exactly what you're saying. It's like, it's extra on top. Like the amount of money and resources my parents put into buying curriculum and all of the extra resource stuff that we needed to
it's a huge investment.
Is a huge investment. And it's also not even that, but it's the investment of time. Like my mom basically taught both of us full time. And then even then she is really good in certain areas, but my dad, he's the math and science whiz, is always good. So he would come home, and then guess what? We're sitting at the table that evening, going over how this, like the amount of like effort my sister, who was struggled in math way more than I did, spent with my dad at the table going over stuff so that she could understand it, is like it's a huge amount of investment.
Props to your parents. Yeah. Jeff, you had asked a question before, and the answer just popped into my head. Now, you had asked about how the private schools were able, Christian private schools were able to handle the COVID things differently. When many of the public schools were closed, they just across the board shut down for months and months and months.
7-year-olds getting online schooling in your living room.
Right.
Yep.
The private schools had the freedom; they were allowed to continue meet in person, provided they met certain criteria, and so our schools were able to do that. And many parents, and that's why we saw an influx of families saying, "I can't. One, I need to go to work. I can't have my kid at home all day just sitting in front of a screen. And two, they're not going to. They don't have the attention span or the discipline to do that. That's not going to work for them. Also, tell me how that works for kindergartners and first graders. That's a real challenge for where they're at developmentally. But we met in classrooms still, and parents signed a waiver at the beginning of the year saying we recognize the risk. Okay, that's why I'm sending my kid there, because they're still going to be in a classroom and they're still going to be with other kids, and they're going to have a gym teacher and a first grade teacher and a music teacher and the
science. Value of that is so much higher than the dollar amount.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that's crazy.
It's even harder because when they switch to virtual learning, you're basically taking this education system that has operated the same way for hundreds of years almost, and then you're like, and now we're just going to cram it into this virtual box, having almost no experience doing this ever. And it's like, this is just the quick solution that we have.
It was so hard. It was so hard on teachers.
Oh
my goodness. So hard on teachers, so hard on students.
My wife was part of that.
Yeah, mine too.
She was a high school math teacher, so she had to deal with all the COVID-ness and teaching online and having to be in the classroom with no students, but just have her webcam going and just teach a lesson. And it was awkward. She could tell the students weren't paying attention, but she had to do it anyway. And just, I don't know.
Yeah, my wife's with kindergartners. You can't even send them home with a Chromebook because they can't type, they can't read, they can't write yet.
Yeah.
So it's,
what do you do?
No, it's tablets, but they can't navigate Google Classroom. They can't read yet, So like the insanity of it all, was crazy. So
That's crazy.
Here's my gift to you this evening.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research, a deep dive. The Jordan Peterson, when asked,
nice.
I'm bringing back the Jordan Peterson.
He made it.
We knew he'd be here.
Yeah. When asked his opinion about homeschooling, and I think this is a direct quote, he said, "I have nothing bad to say about it."
There you go.
Yeah.
What's how?
And if he did, he would.
So is that not how education was for millennia until higher education became a thing and there were colleges and universities and stuff? Like the idea of sending your kid to be instructed by a stranger is kind of new, isn't it?
Yeah.
Relatively, yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, kind of. I'd say the Jews were doing that in the temples for a long while.
Yeah.
That's more religious education than probably mathematical education. But I think the idea that there's a central place of learning by people who spend their time studying isn't.
I'm talking about
kind of a human
the
universal.
education of children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. Being raised by your parents primarily, that's one of the things that's, of course, all the stuff in Florida, if you're living under a rock, the big debate about it is because people are recognizing, especially over the past 2 years, that we've abdicated most of the raising of our kids to someone else to do.
Oh, for
and
real.
Those people have started to actually say, no. We get to tell them what to think. And if we don't want to tell you what we told them, that's fine. And people are recognizing we've actually kind of crossed a line where we lost that connection of, no, these are my kids. I raise them. I teach them what they need to know, or I at least choose who teaches them what is being taught to them. And there's been a bit of as Dan, as you're saying, with being involved in private schools, the fact that you actually get to be involved in it is like, if you told someone that 200 years ago, they'd go, "What? You're not involved in what your kids learn? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's so foreign."
Right? How do you not know?
But now it's expected that you're like, no, you just put them in the schools, and they learn. I don't know, whatever the schools teach them. We're very disconnected from this now.
Yeah, and that abdication has come at such a great cost. I'm old enough to remember, maybe you guys are too, that back in the day, when I would get, when I'd get in trouble in school and a note goes home, Mom is not calling the teacher to chew the teacher out because Dan is such a good boy, but I was in trouble a second time because I acted out in class because my parents and my teachers had very shared values and were in partnership with this. That is not the case. If you talk to most educators, they're not afraid of the students. They're afraid of the parents who are always coming after them. You know, they've got their educational quotas that they have to meet. They have all the check marks that they have to hit for the outcome-based education, and then they've got a parent breathing down their neck because so-and-so, that wasn't fair for Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really a tragedy, the adjustment of standards, not only within like educational, like straight educational standards, but the standards that even parents have for their kids. And it's extremely evident when you have those sorts of reactions. When you have parents coming in and being like, "You're not teaching my kid effectively," as opposed to being like, maybe maybe there's something else. Maybe as a parent, I need to put in the extra effort. It's like, okay, this is the window of failure that's happening right here. Okay, he doesn't understand math the way that he needs to. He's really struggling in this area. Okay, I'm going to have to put in the extra effort to actually make this happen. And it's this very much this hands-off approach of like, okay, well, the teachers have got it. And if they haven't, you're not doing a good enough job.
Yeah, I don't know. That's part of it's just a product of our society now.
Yeah.
We have a me-first society. We don't really, assuming responsibility for your own actions is not taught like it used to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's never, that's being exemplified by, I don't know, the last number of presidencies, including the guy I voted for. Like, he obviously didn't assume responsibility for anything he did either.
Unfortunately.
So it's not we don't have good role models at the top of the chain anywhere. So that's why I don't know. I don't want to go on a huge tangent, but voting on the base of character doesn't make any sense to me because they all suck. So.
Can I give a different spin to our topic of education? Just take a different angle at it real quick, and it won't be long. It's easy for us to, and rightly so, to be critical of the educational system, whether it's homeschooling. It's easy. There's low-hanging fruit to tease and joke about homeschoolers, and those stereotypes get there because there have been plenty of kids who have been the product of and turn out really awkward.
Stereotypes exist for a reason.
Yep. And there is the stereotype of the private education where I'm just going to pay to make sure my kid is getting what he gets, and you know the kid who's always fed with a silver spoon and spoiled. Yeah. There's that stereotype, and the public school is just all garbage and all bad. There are stereotypes there that it's a dumpster fire and it's all going to hell in a handbasket kind of thing. So outside, it's easy to be critical of all of those things. Some of those things are very true, but none of us in this room are educators, but we're closely connected to educators. And I don't know if you know this fun fact. This is National Teacher Appreciation Week.
Oh,
yeah. I didn't know that.
It is.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, take that upstairs with you when you go, because your wife is an educator. Yeah,
get home.
And so
I appreciate you.
I want to think about that for a second. For the moms who stay home and forego what could be a very profitable career and earning income for their family, primarily it's moms.
Yep.
Not always, but primarily for the homeschooling families. That is a huge investment from these kids who they just wish they could get a break from. A little bit. A 7-hour hiatus during the day where somebody else manages your kid would be really nice some days.
We are so thrilled for Kelly to start preschool to get 2.5 hours off.
No, right.
We're like gigging out about this fall for when that's
and every mom and family that makes that homeschooling commitment, props to them, because that is a sacrifice from start to finish, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
And you're figuring it out on your own in most cases. It's not like you went to school and have 4 years of education to train you for this. You're just jumping in and figuring out as you go. Props to those moms. And I think of our private educators like my wife and some who are, I'll tell you, anybody who gets an education is probably not doing it for the paycheck. However, private school teachers make, my wife could easily go to Target and make a lot more than what she does as a private school teacher. And it's most private school teachers those jobs don't come with benefits. They'd be a lot life would be easier if they just went to Panera and served coffee. It would be a lot less stress. And yet they are dedicated. They have this vision and this mission that we're going to raise kids in a way that's not just teaching them math and science and reading and writing, as important as those are, but we're going to wrap that all up in a foundation of biblical standards and principles and hold up the gospel on a regular basis and help them understand that when you're working on a group project, it is good to be patient and kind and gentle and faithful, and the fruits of the Spirit are lived out in our classroom right here. And then I think of our public school teachers who are working hard. I know many, you guys do too, many who, I especially think of those who are Christians in the public school, but across the board, it is hard work. You're up against the expectations for what you're producing in your classroom. If your students do poorly, that reflects poorly on you, even if they're just bad learners. It's your job to get them to figure it out. And then you have the administration who has expectations for you, and you're being reviewed, and you're thinking about job advancement and what's my next position. And you've dedicated your lives to these kids, and you want to see them succeed, and your heart breaks many times because of the situations that they're coming from. I mean, it is a sacrifice across the board for our educators at whatever level and whatever avenue or venue they find themselves in. Props to them. And I don't just say that because it's National Teachers Awareness or Appreciation Week, but it is, you don't get into that because you want to get rich quick. You get into that because you want to invest in the next generation.
Yeah. They do it for the love of the job.
Right.
And unfortunately, hate for the administration often moves them out of the job.
Right.
And
it is the complex economic situation, just like it's teachers and pastors, where like we were saying, like youth pastors don't get paid much. It's because people who want to go into youth ministry actually just really feel called to go into youth ministry, and they're not doing it for the paycheck.
Yeah.
And just like teachers actually feel like, no, this is like my calling in life. I'm made to be an educator of kids, and they don't necessarily have the same economic drive that other industries do.
The motivation is not
they will take
money.
a low pay to do the job.
yeah.
Right. They just got to be able to live. That's kind of the missionary mindset as well. It's not,
Enough to get by. Yeah.
right. You just got to be able to live.
And the crazy thing is, though, is the impact that teachers can have on kids' life is, I don't know if you can actually express it in any way. Like the teacher that I had so after the last 2 years of my schooling, I wasn't like my sister. I actually went to a career center for electronics. So the first half of the day, we would have conventional classes, and then I would go to my career class. And it was like when I was my junior year, it was the first half of the day was my career class, and then senior year it would switch. And my teacher, Mr. Karam, who was my electronics teacher, he completely changed my perspective on learning as a whole, especially as it pertained to like something that was like career forward. And I don't think I would even be an aviation technician if I actually wasn't in his class. And like some of the way he taught and like the passion that he had, and like how like you could genuinely tell how much he actually cared about every single person that was in that, even the knuckleheads that drove him up a wall.
Sure.
You could tell that he like legitimately cared. And it's one thing to have your mom, care about you. It's like, yeah, my mom obviously loves me. Like, I don't have to be like, oh, maybe she like doesn't want to be around me. Like, yeah, but she absolutely loves me. Even though she's my teacher, she's also my mom. So it doesn't really matter what I do. It can kind of be the perspective sometimes. But when you have these teachers that can have an extreme impact in your life, it can be life-changing for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is true. There's another benefit of public school, I guess, is you are opening in private school. Someone being taught by people who aren't just your parents.
Yeah.
Which homeschool has through co-ops and stuff. But you're opening your child's mind up to lots of different perspectives, lots of different teaching styles. So I don't know, that's something to consider as well. What?
Dan, I'm curious, do your daughters play sports?
They do.
How is that? What has that been like with the private schools compared to public school? Because just to lay it out, like the perspective that we had in public school was that most private schools were terrible at sports because they didn't have enough kids.
Yeah.
And public schools have all the people, so you have better sports teams, and they have more money for good sports facilities and all of those things. what has that experience been like for you with your kids?
So, talk to St. Ed's about that. I mean, that's not always the case.
There's,
right?
there's the
Okay.
exception that beat their butts every time we went to states.
And there's right, and so there's
Get
some
it,
private
Dan.
schools. So you're not recruiting technically, but you can really offer some nice packages, right, to some people to make it financially available for them.
Yeah.
And I think the voucher program or the backpack bill is going to be a game changer for that.
Yeah.
Because you have to have a certain size school and body. Let's just talk high school, for instance, to be able to cover the liability insurance and all the equipment you need for a high school football program. It's super expensive, right?
Yeah.
And then all of the transportation, the busing that comes along with that, and to be able to play with the big boys, the other schools who have. When your student body is a total of 500, your pool that you're drawing from is much smaller. That's what you're identifying with right there.
Yeah.
I'll talk about, you asked about my girls' experience. All three of my girls have played multiple sports. And I'm going to brag on them. They've been team captains all along the way, most valuable players on their teams, multiple years. My middle daughter just this last year she went to states. It's middle school, but it's the biggest game tournament. Yep. They took second place in the state. The other coaches nominated from all other teams, all-star players, and she got to play and win in the all-star game for the state.
Wow.
So, so my girls we haven't pushed them to sports. They have gravitated to sports. I've had the privilege of being able to coach at not the high school level, but coach my daughters in volleyball, which has been a real joy. So I get hands-on. So you're asking about the level of the competition. I'll talk about one of the other benefits first. My daughters have changed schools, and in the private school, I identified, you only have one first grade class, one second grade class, one third grade class. So the consequence of that is by the time you're graduating elementary school, the core group of kids have been together in school since kindergarten for 7 years every day. So now my daughter goes off to another school that has a middle school. They've been together for 7 years. She's the new kid. So she comes in, and all these kids have been in the same class every day for the last 7 years, and now there's my daughter, and she's the outsider. She played volleyball. She met with her team a month before everybody came together for school. She already had a close-knit group of girls who were not just in her class, but were in multiple classes, and got folded right into the group and felt socially accepted. And so we all know from our sports experiences what it means to be on a team and the dynamics of that, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but the relationships that are forged through fighting and working together on the court or on the field together, that has been very helpful. And then that's been true as my oldest daughter's gone off to high school. That's just paved the way for relationships when you're going off to a new school. And some students really struggle in school, not academically, but socially. And that's a real struggle for them. Sports have been a good on-ramp relationally for my kids. And so I'm really grateful for that. Now, all of our schools compete in leagues. So they go to, aside from Parma Heights Christian Academy, they're going to Lutheran schools, and the Lutheran schools have a large educational network. The Lutheran Church is very good at producing high quality education for the most part and having a large network. Whereas when I talk about Christian schools, that's actually a Christian academy is a technical terminology, but it'd be very independent. They wouldn't be linked together like a school system would be, whereas the Lutheran schools have a school system. And so that provides additional resources. And while, so their sports teams at the high school level are competing not just against other private schools, but they're competing against all the big high schools in the area and doing well and going to states.
Okay.
That would not be true for every school. I mean, it's a component of size and student body size.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know one of the reasons that our dad wanted to move out of the school system that me and Scott were in is because Scott was entering middle school, and our dad said he is not going to play on this middle school basketball team.
I was not going to stay attending this co-op turned elementary school forever. My parents were going to move me out of that. I think it was pretty sports motivated. I don't know how. I think they liked the education that I was getting, but
from talking to our parents, I'm pretty sure the education there was no complaints about the education. Actually, looking back on it, I think it was probably quite good, relatively.
Yeah.
But the big thing that the issue we had is the school was just too small, and well, at the time, I don't know, I was like 7, didn't really matter what I was doing. But Scott was like old enough that our dad recognized, okay, he's actually a good basketball player for an 11-year-old. This isn't going to cut it. he's gonna be he's never gonna reach his potential if we stay here.
Well, right, and the thing is, we grew up playing all the sports, and
we were in a city, so the sports leagues were actually crazy,
ridiculously competitive. Like we had tryouts in the Metrodome, the Minnesota Twins' former stadium, and there were like hundreds of kids trying not to make one baseball team. Yeah, and I made it. And I was good, but and then all those same kids, they're all going to public school and they're all joining those teams, whereas I was in this private school or this charter school, and I'm going to play on this little charter school team. My dad was like, all your competition's playing in these other leagues. Like you need to get back over here. So
now there's a sweet spot though. If you're in a tiny little school that everybody who walks on is going to make the team because they're just struggling to get enough players on the team, you're not going to get noticed.
Yeah.
If you're at a public school, you can be a big fish, but it's also a big pond. There's a sweet spot with private schools. So the school that the high school that my daughter's going to, they have scouts out there regularly checking them out. And it's a smaller pond. So if you're a big fish, you get easily noticed. And students are getting scholarships regularly. I don't have any thoughts that my daughters are going to be playing any of their sports professionally. However, I hope that they can subsidize some of their college education with some good scholarships. And the school that they're at, they have a good chance of getting noticed at, which is good.
That's good, yeah.
And I'd say I think our high school is actually a really good size for that, being about I think my graduating class was like 230.
Mine was 230,
where there was enough people that you can make a fairly competitive team. Like our baseball team, the last year that I played, we won the whole league.
Way to go.
Played states, all that stuff. So like we were a good team and everything, but it wasn't like there was so many people that you would just get missed because there wasn't enough leagues to play in.
Yeah, and that's why I'm talking about that sweet spot. If you were the 14th best basketball player, but there's only 13 slots, it's like, well, you're still probably a pretty good basketball player. If your class is 1,000 kids, you're probably pretty good.
Yeah.
But are you going to get noticed?
Slots,
right.
Well, I seem to recall one best basketball player ever, Michael Jordan. Debate between him and LeBron. Was cut from his high school team. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
You know, echo that point. You can easily get overlooked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's good to know. I mean, again, our one experience was being at a small school and basically our parents saying, this isn't going to cut it in the sports direction for our kids, which our dad valued highly because he's a big sports fan, big athletic guy. So he's like, I value this too much to just not let my kids experience it. I needed to do something, which is how we ended up. Well, one of the reasons, not the only reason, we ended up moving to Ohio. But it is nice to hear that there is good athletic access in schools your kids' size, and that's not like you're just done for if you're not in the public schools. Because that was kind of a value I had of like, you have to go to public schools if you want good sports experience.
Now we chose our schools in part with that as a factor, though. We could have picked another school that would not be the case.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yep. So you make a fair point. That was something we were evaluating when we were looking at schools.
Nice. We've been going for a good while.
Yeah. So I have one more thing.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say. I think it's easy to look at all the negativity from recent educational experience with the wokeness that's going into schools from COVID causing all these things to happen that have affected our lives. But I think it's good to look at the positive side of things. I don't think that any parent would be aware of what education looks like in their schools if they didn't have it in their living room.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think that any parent would be as involved as they are in these social topics if it wasn't in their face to some degree. So in those regards, I mean, it's kind of bleak from what we can see in education, but at the same time, I think there is a lot of, at least parental care that is starting to infect parents that are out there today, that it's not just this whole like, okay, they got it. We send them to school. They've been doing it for this long. They're obviously good. Of parents being like, wait a second, hold on, and actually putting some care and effort into their children's lives and educations.
Yeah, I am very encouraged that Ron DeSantis in Florida, they signed that bill, or that the left for some reason called it the Don't Say Gay bill, even though it's also the Don't Say Straight bill. It's the Don't Say Anything bill.
Yeah.
It's properly titled the Wait Till 8 bill.
Yeah.
Just wait until they're 8 years old, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah. So there are many reasons to be encouraged by what is happening. But I immediately get discouraged by the way that's all framed. Like, by the way the media freaking twists it drives me insane.
Absolutely.
It's like, that's not what it says. Like, and everyone's just taking it at face value. Like, it drives me crazy.
Well,
but I will say that I am genuinely encouraged by stuff like that. For by the time my kids are in school, like I had said this previously, but I don't want to just cede the territory of public schools, like we were saying earlier.
Absolutely.
You don't want to just pull all the Christians and all the moral families
Well, I think we've
out
already
of public
been
schooling.
doing that for too long. That's why we're here. But
yeah, so I don't want to cede the territory. I think it's something it is a valuable thing that our public education in our countries, in our states, is good. So I don't want to just leave it and go, whatever, just homeschool or whatever, just find a private school. Not that those things are wrong, as we've said. They're great for many reasons, obviously. But just to say, I think it's cool that we're actually starting to push back and say, no, let's not do this. We have to have some sane limits on these things, and it makes me encouraged for that. By the time my kids get to that point, it's very possible I'll decide that public school legitimately is the best option for them, which would be great. I would love it if I could say, hey, this is actually just the best option
with
available.
no regrets.
It's the cheapest, easiest, and it's the best. That'd be awesome.
Scott, I know we're landing the plane. I have 2 parting thoughts.
go ahead.
Is that all right?
Yes.
One, Jeff, we can't give up on our public schools. We need to support them and be actively involved. I was doing humanitarian mission work in Haiti several years ago. Haiti does not have a public education system. The state does not provide any education for their country. And that is a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't educate your people. And the great United States, in part because we have an education system and we train up our people in practical ways, that sets us apart from other nations in the world. That's one. And the second one is I want to encourage you as men who are raising your kids, Nate, hopefully someday, the decision is yours. And the responsibility is yours, and there's accountability with that. I've shared opinions and thoughts here. All of that with the understanding that was what Grace and I felt we were called to for our family as we evaluated where our kids were at. But each family has to evaluate what's best for them, their situation, and their kids. And there are going to be all kinds of people who have all kinds of opinions on how you should raise your kids. And you know what? Someday you're going to be accountable to the Lord for that. And that's not a threat. That's an encouragement to say you do what's right, not what other people think they want you to do with your kids. Because every kid is different. Every family is different. And the opportunities and resources are different for each of our families. So
absolutely.
You just landed the plane to perfection.
Boom.
It was a very soft landing. I didn't even know we were on the ground. It's like, wow.
No bouncing or anything.
So smooth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for joining us again, Dan.
It's a joy.
It's been a pleasure.
I enjoyed this.
We did not get to the more dreary topic, which is fine.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
We
talk
just
about
have to
grief.
save it for
There's some
next time.
foreshadowing.
There could be a 3rd episode with Dan on it. Perhaps. And a 4th and a 5th. Who knows? We can keep this going forever.
This is fun.
Yes. We enjoy doing it. So thank you all for listening. If you wouldn't mind, we enjoyed seeing the graphs spike.
That was a good dopamine hit.
So if you could just really hit that button for us again.
So if you could just listen to this on repeat, it makes us feel a lot better about ourselves.
We're gonna
when
make
you're out of the house, play it for your pets.
Yes. We're gonna make a sleepy time playlist that you just put on when you go to sleep, and you just mute your phone, and then it just gives us listens, and it makes us feel good.
Or share it with some friends who are trying to figure out what they want to do
or
with
do
their
practical
kids.
things like share it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Share it with your friends. Share it with your fam. Just consider the things we talked about. Not that any of us are super authorities on it, but it's just our perspective. So I think we had some good thoughts that were shared. So anyway, that's all we got for this week. We will talk at you next week. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Cheers.
Oh.